The Goth subculture has been around since the late 1970s, and its members are most recognizable through their appearance. Dressing head to toe in mostly black, some with pale, almost whitish skin, dark lips and nails, a studded collar or two, and plenty of buckles. This was the lifestyle that Roz was living as she spun out of control into a life of crime. But all that has changed, and Rosalie Schwarm now joins us on the couch to tell us all about her amazing transformation. Rosalie, welcome to Full Circle.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, amazing transformation is a perfect way to describe you, because looking at you, we'd never imagine that you used to be a part of the Goth subculture. Right. Now, first of all, we need to start out. What is Goth?
Goth is everything that surrounds fear, death, and depression. I'd say that Goth really glorifies death, because if you look at a Goth, I mean, I used to have, you know, skulls in my ears and skulls here and skulls on my boots, and I had bullets on my belt, real bullets on my belt, and everything head to toe shrouded in very medieval-looking attire, and so it really surrounds death. And I always say you probably have never seen a happy-looking Goth. So it's all about that depression, that heaviness, you know, that kind of thing. Lots of witchcraft, occult things.
And how did you, okay, so then you're this in your teen years.
Yeah.
But how did you get to that place? Because I can't just all of a sudden you start dressing in black and start wearing bullets on your belt, right? I mean,
Right.
Obviously it started from somewhere.
Right. I think growing up, I find that the biggest characteristic of people that are in the Goth lifestyle, being there so long, was that there's a lot of rejection that goes with that. And Proverbs 29:15 says that a child left to themselves becomes a shame to their mother. And I think that, now it doesn't mean that you're just left alone, but there was some very severe neglect in our family, and there was 8 of us. So always left alone and to our own devices. And I think that rejection, that first rejection from when I was very young, I didn't have any self-worth. And so you start to gravitate towards things of death, because that's really what it is. Goth is all about glorifying death.
Now, your beautiful accent tells us that you're not from around here. Where is home?
I'm from
originally?
Australia. I'm from Australia.
And you were the 4th of 8 children.
Yes.
Right.
Number 4.
Now, one thing I definitely want to touch on is the fact that, you know, when it comes to a lot of these subcultures, people go to it, same thing with gangs or whatever you're talking about. It's really about community, and we were talking about this before the show.
It's
about
Yes.
family, right?
You're
So
right.
can you talk about that? Because some parents think my kid's just rebelling or my kid's acting up, but sometimes kids are just seeking a home.
You're right. You're right. And I think what the biggest thing is they're seeking affirmation.
Yeah.
You know, the first part of affirmation is affirm. To affirm that you're worth something. To affirm you, that they like you. To affirm. And so that culture definitely comes together, and they're, you know, condemned people, because we used to hang out in condemned buildings and have these drug parties and stuff. Condemned people had each other. Right, all these rejected people had each other, and so you sort of felt a part, even though you didn't feel a part. That, you know, because you could sort of identify with where they were coming from. Yeah, so I agree.
But you say this whole culture is about glorifying death. I mean, you don't just glorify death for the sake of glory. You're getting something from doing that, aren't you? Is there?
Oh, yeah.
There's a power in
Yes.
glorifying death that
Yeah.
empowers a person who is a Goth.
Right. I think as a Goth, you know, dressing head to toe in black, I think it really shows your inside. It shows your inside life. So I felt like I had no life. I hated myself. I tried to commit suicide so many times because I didn't want my life anymore. So you glorify. There's a lot of power in trying to like running. You know, we would take a car and try and beat the train, like playing Russian roulette, right? And so the last death is the last enemy is death, and so you sort of try and outrun death in that kind of lifestyle. You know, we had I don't know if I can say that. You know, just about drugs and things like that.
Sure.
Sorry. Yeah, one of the girls, what they would do is,
Yeah.
I don't want to, because it is kind of intense. What some of my friends would do is take a syringe, fill it with water, and inject it into their system. And the thing is, that doesn't sound terrible, but if you get an air bubble in your system, it can kill you. And so that they would do that just to say, you know, I'm not going to die today, and watch me, I'm going to, you know. So there's a lot of that goes on.
Now, how old were you when you first got into that lifestyle, that subculture, and then how many years did you spend there?
Well, I ran away from home at 15, and I sort of got involved in a group pretty much right away. And it was almost overnight. I had met some friends at a nightclub, And I always looked a little older than I was, and so I could get into these nightclubs, and sort of started hanging out. And it was almost within a day or two, I just went from normal to black. And several years I was involved in that. Yeah.
So volatile upbringing. You've been neglected, you've been abused, you've been impoverished.
Yeah.
You're not seen or known because you're fourth child of 8. So you don't have a stable home.
Yeah.
You run away because your dad fires a shotgun at a boyfriend of yours at a party. I mean, that is traumatic in itself.
Yeah.
And so you look at this, and so you realize that, you're looking for acceptance, identity, purpose, and there you are. And then now you're in the Goth culture, and you're lost. And I mean, I can't believe the stories of that. You've had friends hang themselves, and people kill other people.
Yeah.
What are you thinking there? Do you at some point go, this isn't right, or there's something wrong here?
I think in such a culture that it is, you become desensitized to evil. You don't know what evil is. I mean, when you're playing Russian roulette with trains, and you're watching horror movies, and you're involved in every evil and wicked thing, you become desensitized. So it's not that you don't mourn when somebody dies, but it's just that you just keep on going because you feel like you're dead already. So I find that if you look up in the dictionary what it means to live, it doesn't say, to get old means to have existed for a long time. It doesn't mean that you have lived a long time, to have existed. And I think I was just existing, like day to day, and by my wits, street smart.
Well, I did some research because I was very curious about the Goth subculture and what is it. And I found that while the rate of self-harm among young people in general turns out to be between 7 and 14%, over 53% of those linked to the Goth subculture reported self-harm, and 47% within the Goth subculture had attempted suicide.
Right.
So it really is a dark, shrouded, and they profess to be, just normal, just like anybody else.
Sure they do, and very loving, and they're really, don't want to hurt anybody. But the thing is, they're hurting themselves. And when you're in that kind of lifestyle, I mean, if you want to do away with yourself, it is murder. Suicide is murder, right? And it says, when the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. And you don't realize that if you take your own life that you've committed murder. We don't think of it like that, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of that, a lot of harm.
Okay, now,
it's very harmful.
All of this is happening to you, and obviously you're here today on the couch, so God was in the mix there somewhere. So, while, and I think a lot of the time when you hear people who have stories like yours, God is always in the story somewhere. So, while you're stealing and committing crimes and doing all this stuff, where was God?
I had an auntie that was praying for me, and an auntie, Auntie Maureen, she became a Christian through the death of her husband. It was tragic, and there was something happened to her that I knew was real. I knew that there was something about her that I could talk to her about anything. I mean, I could ask her anything because I never had that growing up. And I think that was, I would ask her things about God, and she would tell me. So she never preached at me. I could just ask her questions, and then she was open and would tell me things. So I would say that I was raised Catholic, but I never knew, like I didn't know him personally. I didn't know Jesus personally. I didn't know, for someone like me, I remember as a kid running to, I always had my favorite spot on top of a dam, and I would cry out to God, who I didn't know, and I'd say, if you're real, show me. And I says, but you could never love someone like me, because I'm so bad. And I was always a kid that was always in trouble, at school. And I mean, from when I remember the first time I stole, I think I was 4 years old. And I think it was like 32 cents or something minor, but it was, I became a kleptomaniac. We had such poverty, and I just wanted pretty things. And that's not a reason to steal, but when you're at school and all of these, kids have the best, and why don't you have? And I was so ashamed of how I grew up. And but I think that God was definitely there. And I know he heard me, even though I didn't feel it at the time, so. Yeah, I always wanted